Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasati.
Hare Krishna, welcome back. My name is Latika and I am reading Bhagavad-gita, and this edition is Bhagavad-gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in the second chapter, and today's verse is text 62, and I might also read 63 because they are kind of connected. We will see. And if you are one of those who study Bhagavad-gita in a little bit systematic way, those two verses are also verses that we like to memorize and learn, because they are, they belong to the core verses of the Bhagavad-gita. I will read the Sanskrit. Jayato vishayan pungsa sangasteshu pajayate sangat sanjayate kama kamat krodho pijayate. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment lust develops, and from lust anger arises. This is interesting. Our modern advertisement industry, they have studied their Bhagavad-gita. This is all advertisement is doing, just pushing the objects of the senses in everybody's face. And then we develop attachment, and then we try to fulfill this attachment, and when we fail, there is frustration, and that frustration also leads to anger. And that's the whole science. It's a whole science. We look at advertisement and we're thinking, I'm not so stupid, I'm not just going to buy this thing. The thing is, they have measured this. When you have this, you have some advertisement, it's a little bit maybe funny, it's maybe a little bit intelligent, and then you have the really, really boring advertisement. They flash their brand of washing powder in your face all the time. And then if you go to the shop and you don't think about it, you look around and you think, oh yeah, that one looks familiar. Of course, we all use washing powder and it's not such a big deal. But in general, that method of contemplating the sense object, of forcing that in other people's faces, that is how they gain their money from us. Because we haven't studied the Bhagavad-gita, so we are a little bit behind. Now we are on to them. I will read the purport. One who is not Krishna conscious is subjected to material desires while contemplating the objects of the senses. The senses require real engagements, and if they are not engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, they will certainly seek engagement in the service of materialism. In the material world, everyone, including Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, to say nothing of other demigods in the heavenly planets, is subjected to the influence of sense objects, and the only method to get out of this puzzle of material existence is to become Krishna conscious. Lord Shiva was deep in meditation, but when Parvati agitated him for sense pleasure, he agreed to the proposal, and as a result Kartikeya was born. When Haridas Thakur was a young devotee of the Lord, he was similarly allured by the incarnation of Maya Devi, but Haridas easily passed the test because of his unalloyed devotion to Lord Krishna. As illustrated in the above-mentioned verse of Sri Yamunacharya, this was a few verses back, yes, a sincere devotee of the Lord shuns all material enjoyment due to his higher taste for spiritual enjoyment in the association of the Lord. That is the secret of success. One who is not, therefore, in Krishna consciousness, however powerful he may be in controlling the senses by artificial repression, is sure ultimately to fail, for the slightest thought of sense pleasure will agitate him to gratify his senses. Yes. So from a modern perspective, of course, we may wonder, well, what is the big deal? Senses, if I'm hungry, I eat. If I want to listen to music, I turn on the machine. If I want to watch a movie, I do that same thing. And that's life. We eat and we sleep and we do things. Yes, and that is our ignorance. We don't realize how this material world is constructed. We don't realize how this body, it's an external thing. It's not us. And it has senses, and they do reach out, and to a certain level we need to give them what they need. I mean, we want to eat, because if we don't eat we will get very tired and we will get very sick and we can't do anything else. But from the perspective of the living entity, the spirit soul, sitting inside his body like on a machine, and waking up to the fact that as a human being we can actually get out of the material world, then we realize there is a bit of a duality there. Our body and our senses, they are external to us, and to a certain extent we need to take care of the bodily business, but we need to keep our focus on the spiritual life. And this word describes the mechanics of senses and sense object. If we contemplate something, then that attachment, that bond will develop, and we will start to identify. Like we look at something like drug addiction. It has a physical component. Some drugs create this withdrawal symptoms that may be very painful and very difficult to overcome, but by determination and with the help of medication sometimes you can pass through that stage. Then, I mean, I'm not an expert. There's different times, there are different symptoms, and some of them are very heavy, and it's better to do in how to say, cooperation with the medical science, so you don't get hurt by it. And some are just disturbing. Like we know people who are smoking and they want to stop smoking. They become very irritable. I mean, they are not exactly in pain. They are not exactly dying, but they become very restless and very annoyed and very irritable. But that passes. But if they still identify as a person who smokes, if they still will think about these cigarettes, they will think about, after I eat, I usually have a cigarette. When I wake up in the morning, I usually have a cigarette. Even when the physical addiction is broken, the identification, how the mind is drawn to that sense object is still there. And similarly, of course, smoking cigarettes doesn't fulfill any needs whatsoever. It costs money, it smells bad, and it makes you sick. So don't smoke cigarettes if you can avoid it. All the other senses, we need to eat, we need to drink, we need to take rest, we need to see something, we need to do something, because we are living entities, and that's how we work. But being a living entity in a material body, we also need to break that identification with the body. And we can't do it by artificially repressing the senses. We want to do it by channeling our senses into spiritual activities, but at the same time we want to be a little careful, because when we present Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada says, what is the difficulty? You chant Hare Krishna, you take prasadam, you have this nice life where you can actually be very fulfilled in your daily life and at the same time make spiritual advancement. But at the same time we need to be a little bit careful that we don't allow the senses to take over. And that this verse describes this in a very practical sense. If we dwell on certain things, and we even see that, I go back to my example with addiction, because it's a practical example. People who have been breaking their habits of drugs, but they are still talking about it, they are still remembering it, they are still dwelling on that aspect of life, instead of establishing a new identity where they focus on something else. Then it becomes very difficult. They say that generally it's difficult to break drug addiction, but people who find religion or people who find love, for them it becomes easier, because they have another focus, they have a new focus in life. So we are not just drug addicts, but we are actually we are addicts of this material body, of this material world, of this false identification of being something else than Krishna's servants. And this has been going on not just for this life, but many lifetimes. So we get some instructions here in a practical way to make it easier for us. Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada says, it's simple, but it's not always easy, because we have these habits. And here we get some instructions how to overcome that. I will read text 63. That's also one of those verses you can learn by heart. krodhad bhavati sammoha, sammohat smriti vibhramaha, smriti bhrangshad buddhinasho, buddhinashat pranashyati. From anger, complete delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost, and when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. Purport. Srila Rupa Goswami has given us this direction. Prapanchikataya buddha, prapanchikataya buddhya, harisambandhi vastunaha, mumukshubhi parityago, vairagyang phalgukatyate. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1-258. By development of Krishna consciousness, one can know that everything has its use in the service of Krishna, of the Lord. Those who are without knowledge of Krishna consciousness artificially try to avoid material objects. And as a result, although they desire liberation from material bondage, they do not attain the perfect stage of renunciation. Their so-called renunciation is called phalgu, or less important. On the other hand, a person in Krishna consciousness knows how to use everything in the service of the Lord. Therefore, he does not become a victim of material consciousness. For example, for an impersonalist, the Lord, or the Absolute, being impersonal, cannot eat. Whereas an impersonalist tries to avoid good eatables, a devotee knows that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer, that he eats all that is offered to him in devotion. So, after offering good eatables to the Lord, the devotee takes the remnants called prasadam. Thus, everything becomes spiritualized, and there is no danger of a downfall. Whereas the non-devotee rejects it as material, the impersonalist therefore cannot enjoy life due to his artificial renunciation, and for this reason, a slight agitation of the mind pulls him down again into the pool of material existence. It is said that such a soul, even though rising up to the point of liberation, falls down again due to his not having support in devotional service. Yes, so this is actually very important. Spiritual life is not something foreign, something external, something we want to achieve with our own strength and despite the material circumstances. We are of the spiritual nature. We are the spirit soul situated in the body, and spiritual life is completely natural. We have forgotten it. We have forgotten our identity, our activities, our spiritual nature. We have come to this material world, and we have somehow or another accepted this idea that we are connected to this body, that we are connected to this material world. But spiritual life, it doesn't mean to reject the material world. It means to take up the spiritual activity. We need some practice. We have some guidelines, some principles to protect that little growing spirituality in our heart. So we avoid certain activities, we practice other activities, but the principle is the same. The principle is that we don't just push down our senses, we find a way to connect them in Krishna's service. And in that existence, like if you become very harsh on your senses and very powerful in your renunciation, you can become very brittle. You can become very easy to break because you're holding on and you're kind of going against your own nature. And with a little bit of an adversary, you may break. Or with a little bit of a sensual attraction, you may be falling down, because we need that support of devotional service. Because when we surrender to Krishna in devotional service, when we take up the practice of bhakti yoga, we're not doing it exactly on our own strength, because Krishna is actually there. He's actually waiting for us. Okay, they have all gone away, they've gone to the material world, they're trying to build up a life separate from me, and I respect that. But I can also see it's troublesome for them, all those souls in the spirit, in the material world. And I know them, and I love them. I love each and every one of them. And when they turn back to me, Krishna says, He helps them. He helps each and every one of us. So we are not just struggling on our own with our senses. we're actually getting the support of devotional service, and then we can rest in that consciousness. We're not constantly just, climbing a mountain and its ice and its winds and all of that. We're finding that shelter that is permanent. We're finding that place where we actually belong. But on the way, it's good to know these things. It's good to know how desires work. Desires also work in a spiritual sense. When a devotee becomes mature, when a devotee becomes realized in his spiritual identity, that means desires are very active, but they are connected to Krishna. A devotee very strongly desires to offer some service to Krishna, and depending on your nature or situation, somebody will cook, we heard that here, cook something very nice and thinking, how can I cook the best meal for Krishna? Or somebody will study the scriptures or give Krishna consciousness to others, or do some simple service like cleaning Krishna's temple, cleaning Krishna's pots, we hear, is like cleaning our heart. All those activities are there, and we find that sometimes these descriptions sound like philosophy, but they're actually just, how to say, they're an impetus. Take up this Krishna consciousness, try it for yourself, and then you can notice how your senses become. It's not a question of either just becoming covered again and taking fully up material sense activities, or becoming very strict and spiritual and giving them up completely. No, there is no dilemma. Some things we give up because they are not really useful, but in general we will live a life, we will live a full life, but we will connect it to Krishna, and in this way there will be some steadiness, some strength, and we will be able to give up materialism, because spiritual life is enough for us. We're happy in that. So that's some of the words from the Bhagavad-gita, and these verses, I like them very much. Thank you so much for hearing. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for watching. We aim for updates every Tuesday and Friday. Please come back. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down there. We also have some links and information for you. And there is, of course, the subscribe button. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
I'm a Hare Krishna, and I approve this message. Subscribe.
Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Juta Padakamalam